Hello, and the warmest of welcomes to today's iOB business webinar. It's a pleasure to have you on here. My name is Ben, and I'm the resident business coach here at iOB Business. Okay, now today's conversation is all about why the story that you tell yourself is so important. Okay, we need to make sure that we focus on these kinds of things as business owners, as progressive business owners, to make sure that we understand bits about mindset, bits about business. Okay, so it's going to be today more focused on how we can manage ourselves, manage our mental capacity, manage our mind space, and how we can progress as individuals, and really how that's going to tie into our business life. Okay. Now, if you've joined us before on one of these iOB business webinars, a very warm welcome back, and you'll be familiar with how these run. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, a huge welcome. It's a pleasure to see some new faces on here. We're just giving it a brief moment now for everybody to join us for today's session. Okay. Now, what we will do is we'll run through how these sessions work just so that you become familiar with it and what you can do throughout today's session. Okay, so if this is one of your first time joining us on these webinars, we do a brief introduction with myself before we get kicked off. Once again, my name is Ben. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to our session. Now, our session is going to run for around about 15 to 20 minutes or so today. Okay. Now, what you can do throughout today's session is you're more than welcome to ask questions. You're more than welcome to jot down any notes that you might have as well. Okay, now in between each of the three topics that we cover, I'm going to give you a brief moment to ask any questions and take down those notes if you so wish. Okay, so please don't feel rushed. Please don't worry. We're going to give you a bit of time at the end of each session to jot down any notes from the slides. Okay, now, if you're looking to ask questions, there's a gray Q&A box at the bottom of the screen there. You can go ahead and use that box throughout today's session. And what will happen is I'll get those questions gathered in a neat little box for me, and I can answer them for you in the end of today's session during the Q&A segment. Okay. So whilst we are waiting for everybody to join us, I'm just going to go ahead and get us set up on today's session. Okay. So if you give me a brief moment there, I am just going to pull up today's presentation that we have up for us today. Okay. Now there we are, just pulling it up. Okay, excellent. So let me push you onto that screen as well so that you can see the presentation that we have up on screen for you today. Okay, now, once again, why the story that you tell yourself is more important than you realize. Okay, big topic of conversation today. Big topic we're going to be talking about on mindset, on business, on how you can focus on these things going forward. Okay. So you should no longer be able to see my face. Lucky for you, we are going to be looking at the presentation on screen today instead, and hopefully you should still be able to hear my voice. Okay, so why the story you tell yourself is more important than you realize. If you could please just give me a little heads up and let me know if you can hear my voice okay, and if you can indeed see the screen there for you as well. All right, just pop that in the chat box for me. Perfect. Thank you so much indeed. I've got a couple of confirmations, so I think we are good to go and we can get kicked off with today's session. Okay, so why the story you tell yourself is more important than you realize. Okay, your presenter today is myself. My name is Ben. The beer's changed ever so slightly, but I promise it is me, and I am a business coach. Okay, I specialize in working with small businesses just like yours and helping them achieve stability and growth. Now, on today's session, there's definitely going to be a vast array of wonderful people on here, as there always is. And what we're looking at is people who are already running digital agencies, people who are just looking to get started, and people who are just midway through their venture. Okay, so for all of you, for every wonderful person on today's session, please be aware that the content on here is for you. It's going to be useful. It's going to be valuable. Okay, so moving on to what we're going to talk about today. Number one, we're going to discuss the negative versus the positive. Okay, the story that you tell yourself, how this can impact you. So we're going to look at the negative connotations, the negative points that you can tell yourself, and we're also going to look at the positive things and how these affect you day to day. Number two, we're going to talk about ensuring that the intentions become reality. Now, I'm sure this is something that many of you can empathize with, many of you can relate with, is when we've had these dreams, these goals, these objectives, okay, these intentions, how often do they become a reality for you? Okay, now that's perfectly independent, perfectly up to you to decide and see how these things come forward for you. But most of the time, in my experience, many people can have these intentions and they unfortunately don't follow through. Therefore, they don't become reality. All right, so let's have a look at that one. And finally, we're going to discuss self-defeating tendencies, okay, how you can avoid it, what it means, and what it means for your business as well. Okay, so getting kicked off with point number one today, we're going to talk about the negative versus the positive. Okay, now this phrase, I can do it. Okay, this phrase, I can do it. What does this mean to you? Okay, what is the connotation of I can do something really mean throughout your system, throughout your business ecosystem? Okay, let's look at these. First up, we're looking at this idea that we are intelligent. Okay, this is the mentality, the mindset, positiveness that we're looking at. Okay, I am intelligent. The story that you begin to tell yourself has such massive effect. Okay, now what we're looking at here is understanding about who we are, what we do, and how it affects our business. Okay, now the story that you tell yourself, in many ways, we're going to discuss this throughout today's session, but what's extraordinarily important is that you're aware of how the things that you tell yourself affect you day to day. Now, the day to day is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing in business. If your day to day is wrong, it doesn't matter how many intentions you have, how many goals you have, how many objectives you have, because if you're not putting the work in day to day, it's going to become irrelevant. Okay, we can sit there and say, oh, we'll do it next week. We'll do it next month. That's actually something for next year. You know what? Let's not worry about it. I'm having a bad day today. I don't feel so smart. And guess what? If you're telling yourself that you don't feel overly intelligent, that you're not overly capable, you're going to begin looking at the words on the screen. They're not going to make any sense. Things are going to stop going into your brain, not because you can't understand it, but because you are consciously blocking it. Okay. Now, this is something that is so important that you avoid. Okay. I am capable. Now, I'm sure when you've had a dark moment, a rough time, potentially even speaking with somebody that you care about, somebody that you trust, somebody whose guidance and tutelage you rely on, you've said to them, I don't think I can do it. It's not for me. I'm not capable. I'm not the person who is supposed to do this. Maybe there's other people out there who have bigger dreams, better ideas. Maybe they're smarter. Maybe they're faster. Maybe they have better contacts. Maybe they have a bigger network. Okay. You are capable. And if you continually tell yourself that you're capable, this is this internal story. I am capable. I can do it. I am intelligent. Guess what's going to begin to happen? It's going to begin to unravel in your mind that you are the person suited for this story. You are the person suited for this venture. Why? Because you've decided that you are. Every single great story, every single great person began with them telling themselves that they could do it, believing in themselves without the want to dart too much over these cliches. Now, I understand how this can come across as textbook motivational material. Okay, but I want you to think about it deeper than that. I want you to understand how the story that you tell yourself begins to affect your subconscious. Okay, now, I have worked hard to achieve successful outcomes before. I can do it again. So how powerful this phrase can be is when you look at the concept of taking on something new. It can be intimidating, it can be bulky, it can be too big to defeat in your mind. Okay, what you must remember always to tell yourself is that whether it's something specific or whether it's something of a similar category or style or size, there's a very good chance that you have worked hard to achieve something in the past. You have worked to achieve a successful outcome, which means doing it well, and whoever you're doing it for or whatever you were doing it for has worked out nicely as well. Maybe you got a pat on the back for doing it. Maybe you got an A+ when you were at school or uni, whatever that means, however that can be defined to you. Incredibly well done. Now, you can do it again. Why? Because if you've done it once, you can do it again. It doesn't matter necessarily what the project is if you're skilled in a specific area. So let's say it is an essay, copywriting project, SEO work, email campaigns. It might look big, it might look daunting, but if you've done anything even remotely similar to this before, even if you've worked on a specific project or an idea that you have worked hard to achieve successful outcomes on before, apply that same mentality. Give yourself the credit that you deserve and be aware that this is not your first rodeo. This isn't the first time that you've done something and you can do it again. Okay? This task is not bigger than me. I can use my experience to break it down and overcome it. Remind yourself of the previous success that you have experienced and that you have had and enjoyed, more importantly. Remind yourself also that this task is not bigger than you. Okay? The day that you're going to begin to believe that something is bigger than you, that you are incapable, is the day that you're going to allow it to defeat you and defeat yourself. Okay? You can use your experience in successful projects, successful outcomes in the past, whatever that task, idea, concept might have been, you can break it down and overcome it. Okay, now one of the biggest tools, you'll have heard me speak about this before, when you're breaking something down, you're looking to overcome a certain barrier, you take these big, seemingly insurmountable objects and you break them down piece by piece, and you begin to realize, actually, I think there is something that I can do here. I think I can break this down into segments. I think I can engineer it differently. And I think I can overcome these obstacles. Okay. Now, this is the positive reinforcement, the positive things that you can tell yourself. Now, let's run over briefly. I can't do it. Okay. This task is way too big. I'll never get it done. I should just withdraw. Sound familiar? Something that maybe you've told yourself before. Okay. Now, of course, let's look at this in a negative light. Okay. Positive is I can do it. Negative is I can't do it. I cannot. Okay. The task is way too big. What are we doing here? We're being pessimistic deliberately. Okay. I'll never get it done. Okay. But you're giving yourself a closing statement there. If you're so sure that you'll never get it done, I would imagine too that you're probably not going to get it done. I should just withdraw. Okay. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do that. Okay. Now, the reason that this internal story continually comes up, and something I'm going to continually say throughout today's session, is because if you are telling yourself that something is way too big, you're like, that's it. I can't do it. Pessimistic point of view. Okay. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what pessimistic means, it means almost deliberately taking a negative point of view instead of choosing to be what some would say is realistic, where we think, okay, look, I'm not being negative or positive. I'm just looking at what I believe the outcome is going to be. Or optimistic, where we're believers in the fact that it's going to be successful. It's going to be great. It's going to be encouraging. Okay. Now, I'll never get it done is a very finalizing statement. Okay. I will never do this. If you're sitting there, you're working on something, you're telling yourself that you'll never get it done, maybe there's a chance that you won't get it done. Why? Because you're losing motivation, you're losing mental energy, you're allowing yourself to dissipate. Okay. I should just withdraw. I should let it go. It's too big. It's too difficult. Okay. Now, everybody is allowed to have bad days. Everybody is allowed to have off moments. This is human nature. This is natural. This is something that can happen. What you must do is remind yourself of the positive points that we discussed above. You can use your experience to break it down. You can do it because you're intelligent, you're capable, and you've worked hard in the past to achieve similar things, even if in something completely different. Okay, even when you were in school as a child, you've worked hard on things. Maybe it was sports, maybe it was academia, whatever it was, there's a strong chance that you worked hard to achieve something in the past, even if you can't necessarily remember doing so. Okay, now here's another big one that I see negatively coming across. Okay, my brain just isn't working today. I'll just move it off and I'll do it tomorrow. Okay, now you'll have heard this phrase in familiarity in whatever kind of way it's been given to you. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes. I'll do it next week. Next week never comes. Okay. Now, what this phrase actually means is, of course, that time does arrive, but you still feel exactly the same. Okay. These procrastinating tendencies, these procrastinating behaviors are really what's slowing you down. It's not necessarily the fact that your brain isn't working today. It's the fact that you already decided that it's not going to work today, and therefore you'll do it tomorrow, hoping that somehow you're going to look at it with a fresh lens, I suppose, a fresh perspective tomorrow. Now, while sometimes this is going to be true, other times, what you need to remind yourself of is that the endorphin rush, the hormone, the chemical release that provides good feeling, provides this sense of accomplishment, comes from getting something done. Okay. So if you're feeling a little bit rough, you're feeling a little bit not up to it today, make yourself a commitment and say, okay, I'm not going to get 100% done today, but I'm going to try and do just 10%. Now, after that 10%, see how you feel. If you feel good, which is very, very likely because you're going to have a good sense of achievement, go on and do 20%, 30%, 40%. Now, even if you retire for the day at 40%, that's an awful lot more than what you said you were going to do originally. So you can give yourself a pat on the back. Okay. Now, even if I do complete it, it won't be good enough and I'll just have to do it again. What you're doing is already discrediting yourself before you've even tried. Okay. This is these defeatist opinions, these defeatist things that we tell ourselves that even if I get it done, there's a good chance that it's just not going to be enough. And I'll just have to do it again anyway. So what's the point? Let's just leave it because I can't be bothered doing this over and over and over again. Now, what you're doing is telling yourself a story. You're creating a hypothetical story in your own head that hasn't happened yet. And then you're allowing this hypothetical concept to begin defeating you. Okay. Now, I can't remember the specifics of it, but there was a childhood story that I love that relates to this so much. And it's that a hare, I'm not sure why it has to be a hare, but it's like a rabbit is driving a car, okay? And the car breaks down and they begin to slowly crawl up to a house down a lane. Okay, now the house down the lane has some tools to help them fix the car. Now the rabbit gets out of the car, they begin walking down the lane and they say, this is going to be great. I'm going to get the tools that I need. I'm going to fix the car and I'm going to be on my way. Now, with each step that the rabbit takes, they become increasingly more likely to overthink things. They develop this feeling of doubt, this feeling of negativity. The more it creeps in, they begin to say to themselves, actually, what if they don't have the tools that I need? Take another few steps. Actually, what if they're not very nice to me? Takes another few steps. What if they're not very nice to me and they don't have the tools that I need? Takes another few steps. Actually, this is completely pointless. They don't have the tools that I need. They're going to be really nasty to me. They're going to ruin my day even more. And I'm never going to be able to get back in my car and start driving again. So the rabbit finally reaches the door. They knock on the door. And before the person even opens the door, the rabbit says, you know what? Forget your tools. I don't want them anyway. And storms back off up the road. Okay. Meanwhile, the person in the house standing there with the tools ready to fix the car. Okay. Now, that's not the best description of this story, but it is a wonderful concept to remember that this rabbit had gotten so much in his own head. Okay. Now, it is, of course, a childhood story, but it teaches us a lot about how we treat others and how we think positively. Okay. But the lesson from this is that if you tell yourself a story so often that you can't do it, you're then creating this enemy, you're creating this idea in your head that something cannot be done. And if that's the story that you begin to believe, that's the story that's going to come to fruition. Okay. The story you tell yourself comes to fruition. Okay. So I know that was an awful lot to take in. We spent a good amount of time on that slide there. So I'm going to give you a moment. Please do jot down any notes that you'd like to take. And indeed, feel free to ask away with any questions that you might have as well. It's a pleasure to answer them, and I'd be more than happy to do so. So don't be shy, and I'll see you again very briefly for topic number 2. Okay, let's get started on topic number 2 for today. Okay, ensuring the intentions become reality. Okay, now micro behaviors. Okay, you might not have heard of this concept before. Whenever I talk about this, I usually get a couple of questions on it, so feel free to ask away. But what a micro behavior is essentially is a 1% improvement each day. Okay, micro behaviors, micro changes. Okay, so what we're talking about here is ensuring that your ideas, your intentions, they become reality for you. Okay, your reality largely in many circumstances has at least something to do with how you decide it's going to be. Okay, now some of us, I understand we have different circumstances, different obstacles in front of us, but for the large part, mostly what we can do is sculpt parts of our reality, if not all of it. Okay, so micro behaviors, what does this mean? It means improving by 1% each day. Okay, now 1% is just an example. You can say improving by 1 step at a time, improving by micro steps, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but essentially the theory of the point here is that the story that you tell yourself becomes a reality. Point number 1. Point number 2, look to improve by 1% each day. Why? Because if you try and move mountains overnight, it's not going to work. Okay, you don't want to shock your system. You don't want to throw yourself into a state of turmoil. We don't know what waits up. Okay, what we want to do is make minute improvements each day to give us more of what we want. Okay, more of how we want to behave, more of how we want to act, more of what we want to achieve. Now, what this means specifically, okay, is that each day when we wake up, we look to do one thing slightly differently. Okay, if we want to improve by 1% each day, we wake up and maybe we don't check our phone first thing, maybe we go for a glass of water. That's one change that progressively over time is going to allow us the opportunity to improve. What we want to do is begin factoring in these micro changes to our system, these micro changes to our mind to gradually over time build new habits, build fresh routines. Okay, if something is negative, something is affecting us negatively, we can't just shift it overnight, or you can try, but we don't want to try and move 100% overnight. What we want to do is focus on it bit by bit so that these new 1% changes become habitual and we're dipping our toe in the water, okay, before just diving right in at the deep end. And over time, you'll have formed these new habits. It takes approximately 3 weeks to form a new habit. Okay, this is just an estimate, not necessarily concrete proof. But if you look at it this way, Okay, it takes 3 weeks to change a habit. Let's say that you begin not checking your phone first thing in the morning. You give yourself a chance to wake up first. Let's say that you try and be a little bit more positive. Okay, you work on this becoming a habitual routine. Maybe let's say that you try and go out for a walk every morning. You allow this to become a routine, but you don't throw all three of them in together and say, I'm going to be positive, I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to stop checking my phone, because your body's like, whoa, this is too much. I don't know what's happening. Okay, so micro behaviors, 1% improvement each day. Next thing that you can do is take full ownership of your habits and begin looking in the mirror. Okay, many of us can live in this denial reality where we say, no, that isn't happening. I'm doing great. I'm doing fine. We're not actually taking full ownership of whatever our habits are. So if our habits are turning in early, maybe stopping work, or maybe not getting as much done as we would hope to that day. Maybe we're avoiding certain conversations. Maybe we reschedule meetings when we know that we could take them just because we don't feel like it. Okay. Now take full ownership of your habits. Okay. Because ultimately you've got your conscious, you've got your subconscious, and a little bit in between is thinking about who you are as a person. Okay. Thinking about what it is that you want to achieve. And if you continually live this day to day in the sense of, no, actually, I'm going to dodge that meeting today because I don't want to have it. Or I'm not going to spend 8 hours at my desk today. I'm just going to do a couple. I'm going to do the bare minimum, and I'm going to go enjoy myself for the rest of the day. Okay. Now, hopefully you'll be enjoying your work, but you understand what the intention is here. Okay. Now, these habits day to day may give us this temporary feeling of relief and happiness. But ultimately, when you begin thinking about your overall objectives again, maybe last year you told yourself you were going to hit 6 figures. Maybe last year you told yourself you were going to become an owner of a business. Maybe last year you told yourself that your reality today was going to look differently. Now, if you're sitting in the same position or worse than you were last year, there's a very strong chance it's because you didn't take ownership of your habits. You allowed these to keep forming, and you told yourself that everything was okay, but time passes with or without us. And that is the unfortunate reality. The unfortunate truth is that we cannot stop time. Time is moving forward with or without us. Now, if we decide not to change our day to day, if we decide not to change the habits that we do in order to create the outcome, the reality that we want, and we don't look in the mirror and give ourselves these hard truths, nothing's going to change. Okay, so we need to ensure that our intentions become reality by adopting these new behaviors. Now, what you can do to get started is you can prioritize things that you can change today, right now. Okay, so what is it you can change? Well, you can get up earlier tomorrow morning. You can work an extra project this afternoon. You can take a call this afternoon. You can make a call that you've been meaning to make for weeks this afternoon. You can do it right now. You can do it as soon as this webinar finishes. You can go and get yourself another glass of water. Okay, simple things, keeping yourself better hydrated, taking better care of your health. You can go out for a walk. You can go to the gym. You can prioritize things that you can change today, right now. What's your new commitment? What is it that you're going to do to make sure that your overall intentions begin to form a new reality for you? 1% improvement each day. Be patient, and your mind will allow you to reap the rewards of your continual hard work. Tomorrow, do the same. Pick something that you want to change, go and do it. Every single day, make a 1% improvement. Okay, and that doesn't necessarily mean that your life is not good, that your life is not great, but there will always be something that you can improve on. There'll always be something that you can tweak ever so slightly to make your reality, your desired reality, more something that you can attain. Okay. Now, compound this behavior so that you begin to move mountains over periods of time. Imagine you had committed to what you told yourself you were going to do this time last year. Where would you be now? Okay, so make sure that you're understanding these behavioral concepts and how you can begin to move your own mountains over time. Now, I'm going to give you a brief moment to go ahead and jot down any notes and ask any questions. Please feel free, and I'll be right back with you very shortly for topic number 3. Okay. Okay, fantastic. So we're moving on now to topic number 3, third and final topic of today's conversation, self-defeating tendencies. Okay, now here's something that we can do that happens to many of us that actually stops the train before it even starts rolling. Okay, essentially what we're doing when we do this is skipping to the end before beginning. Okay, now here's a concept of it. Okay, let's say that we're beginning to write a large project. Okay, say this project is 20 pages long, and we begin to think what the last page is going to look like. We begin to think of our summarizing or final statement of the whole piece that we can summarize in order to effectively make sure that whatever project we've completed is summarized well and passed off to whoever it needs to be passed to. Now, what's happening here is that you have just skipped to the end of the 20 pages that you need to write. Now, whilst you may think in some ways this is productive, okay, I suppose you could write down the summary, but you don't know what you're going to write yet. You haven't even begun working on the project. Now, what's happening is you've already in your head fast forwarded to the end. You've already skipped past all of the hard work, all of the pieces that you thought you were going to have to do, whether consciously or subconsciously. Now, what happens is, and this is a trick that you may not have noticed before, it makes a task feel unconquerable, insurmountable, okay? Why? Because in your brain, you have already done it. If you're right at the end, you're already imagining what it's going to be like when you've completed the project and what you're going to get paid for it and the reaction of your client or whoever's getting the project, okay? Now, this is just an example. You're already imagining all this, therefore you've sort of forgotten almost subconsciously that you have to do this work in order to make that result happen. Something that you can do is avoid skipping to the end of the project, avoid skipping to the end of whatever it is that you're doing before you've even started. Why? Because you don't want to convince yourself that it's already done, wrapped up nicely with a bow on top before you've even started, because you're going to begin to feel like it's inconquerable or unconquerable and insurmountable. Okay, it's a trick for you there. Please keep it, because it's something that I worked on many, many times to begin to realize, actually, that's what this is, almost a self-discovery of sorts, okay? And one that's very valuable to business owners throughout this webinar and beyond, okay? So desiring the medal, but not being willing to run the race. Now, this is something that I've come across so many times as a business coach. And essentially what this analogy means is that somebody desires the medal, the achievement, the reward for doing something without being willing to actually do the legwork. Okay, now let's say that we have two people in this scenario, and person one has been working on building a successful digital marketing agency for 5 years. They now enjoy having 50 clients who all pay them a very good amount of money, and they enjoy having 5 staff members who are on great salaries and who are very well taken care of under this thriving digital marketing agency that this person one, has created. Okay, now let's say that person two comes along and really they say, oh, well, that looks easy enough. You've got 50 clients, you've got quite a good turnover, and you've got these lovely staff members working for you. So how can I just do the same? Person one will tell person two how they can achieve the same, and person two will say, oh no, it doesn't need to take 5 years because you were learning and you were practicing. Just tell me how I can get straight to getting 50 clients bit. Okay, now this happens very, very often, and I'm sure you'll understand this analogy. Ultimately, you have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to run the race, make your own mistakes, make your own discoveries, learn your own way through. Okay, there are companies that I've known that have been around for years and they still consider themselves a startup because we're all learning, but you have to get the experience from running your own race. You cannot take the medal for somebody else's race, and better yet, you can't copy the medal for somebody else's race. You have to have run the race, understand how it feels, how it impacts you, how it impacts others, and what direction you want to take when running the race. All these things that you would miss if you decided to just try and grab the medal right at the end there before actually doing the legwork. Okay, now this is such a common mistake that can be completely avoided by understanding that things don't come overnight, but if you do the work, you gain the experience, you can have what these other people have or your own version of that. Okay, now overwhelming yourself with objectives is putting too much weight on your shoulders. Okay, self-defeating tendencies. If you put too many things on your back, you're going to begin to struggle. Okay, don't overwhelm yourself with countless objectives, because I know that your brain will be busy. I know that you'll have many, many ideas, but what you've got to make sure of is that you don't put too much on at one time. Okay, imagine you're doing a hill walk, you're climbing up a mountain, you're carrying one bottle of water to the top, you're coming back down for the next one. If you try and put 20 bottles of water on your back all at one time, you might not even make it up the mountain. Okay, so you need to make sure that you're taking one golden objective at a time, you're smashing it, you're working through it before giving yourself another one. Okay, and finally, desiring relaxation before achieving something. So we talked about this slightly earlier in the webinar. Okay, I know we're running a little bit longer than we usually do, so hopefully you're still enjoying the content and there's lots of valuable stuff to get through with you. Okay, but ultimately, desiring relaxation before actually achieving something is a mistake that so many of us make, because we say, oh, I'm just going to relax, I'm going to chill out now, and I'm going to go and I'm going to do something better tomorrow. Now, have you ever heard the phrase that food tastes better when you've worked hard for it? Did that glass of wine taste better when you've worked hard for it? Okay. Now, if you've got a big project that you're procrastinating on and you've decided, oh, I'm not going to do it today, I'll just do it tomorrow. You go and you try and relax, but it's in the back of your mind knowing that you shouldn't be relaxing right now. You should actually be doing something productive. Okay. Now, whether this be true or not, this is one of the stories that in my experience, you begin to tell yourself. because we're desiring this relaxation before we've actually achieved something. Okay. Now, the food tastes better when you've worked for it. When you've had a really, really, really productive, successful day, how delicious does your dinner taste at the end of the day? Okay. Versus if you just decided actually you didn't want to do that today and you're just going to go ahead and have dinner, get a good night's rest and go again. Now, while sometimes this is the answer, 99% of the time, at least try and do something productive because it will give you an endorphin rush. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief moment there. Please do go ahead and jot down any questions and any notes that you'd like to take before I take you on to today's recap for the session. Okay. Excellent. Okay, perfect. So hopefully you've had a chance now. I've got a question in there. Thank you so much. I'll get to those at the end. Now, summary of today's session. To recap, point number one, give your brain the correct narrative. Make sure that you're telling yourself the positive instead of the negative. Number two, compound good habits to move mountains over time, not overnight. Okay, 1% daily improvement. And finally, be mindful of skipping to the end before even beginning. This is something that we can absolutely make sure that we do not do. Break down your projects, take it one step at a time, and make sure that you're not mentally fast forwarding to the end and what the end is going to feel like before you even got started. Okay. Now, as always, an enormous thank you for taking the time to be here with us today on this webinar. If you would like to talk to a member of our team, you're more than welcome to head over to iob-business.com/talk-to-us. And on this site, you can go ahead and book a call with us at any time that suits you on this calendar there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab your questions. I'm going to leave this link up on screen for you. Okay, so questions that I have from you today. Question number one, can you explain what micro behavior is again? I sure can. Okay, so micro behavior really is the small tendencies we have that ultimately compound to the overall decision. All right, for example, when you wake up in the morning, are you looking out the window at the sunshine or are you scrolling on your social media? Okay, this simple minor habit could be part of the compound that stops you from having a productive work day. Now, this alone probably won't, but if you're doing this in lots and lots of different ways, okay, let's say that, you know, I'm no health expert by any measure, but I would imagine looking out the window at the sunshine as opposed to scrolling on your social media, probably a more positive thing to do. Going out for some fresh air instead of staying in the house in the morning, probably another good idea. Okay, but these are tiny micro behaviors. Going for a glass of water, then your coffee, instead of going straight for, you know, potentially a sugary fizzy drink in the morning. Okay, now again, like I said, I'm no health expert, but it would be my guess that these things would probably be better for you than the alternative. Okay, so hopefully that helps you understand what micro behaviors are. Thank you ever so much for asking. Number two, why is skipping to the end a bad thing? Awesome question. All right, cool. Reason being, most of the time you can mentally exhaust yourself before you begin. All right. Now, if you visualize being at the end of your task too much, you can begin to believe that you're done, essentially. And now you don't want to do this to yourself, because mentally exhausting yourself, it can be so disheartening. Because if you convince yourself that you have achieved something by mentally fast forwarding to the end, then you go back and you look at this mountain that you have to overcome. You'll be thinking, oh my God, I thought I already did that. Okay. Now, this is very similar to, have you ever woken up on a Wednesday morning and you thought that it was the weekend? Have you ever woken up and think, oh, hey, it's Saturday? And, you know, potentially when you were younger, when you're at school, and then you realize it's Wednesday. It's that kind of feeling. Okay. So you don't want to do that. All right. Now, hopefully that analogy makes sense. I'm sure it won't to everyone, but hopefully some of you understand what I'm talking about. But the overarching point here is you don't want to mentally exhaust yourself before you've had a chance to begin working on something, because it could be something great and you don't want to feel defeated before you've even begun. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick check for any more questions that I have. All right, awesome. Looks like that is the questions for today. So once again, a huge thank you for attending. It's been a real pleasure presenting to you today. Thank you ever so much, and I hope to see you again on the next iOB business webinar a couple of weeks from now. Take care and bye for now.